Alrighty, folks, coming to you live from out here at the bunker off Karis Road. This here is Bill David, president of the 582nd out there at Tango Delta Zulu. I'm down here in the bunker bringing to you the latest on the pandemic panic policy, procedures, and protocol that y'all need to know to be able to survive this epidemic. So we got a lot going on here. Let's go ahead and get on down to business. Now, before we get started, I've got a little bit of sad news. We lost Ray Gargak, better known to us as the Rocket Man. He and his wife, Bernadine, have been fixtures around the plane fun fly-in for decades, literally. And his grandchildren are always there to help out. And what Ray did was run the rocket thing for the kids. They would build and fly these model rockets propelled by compressed air. They loved it. Ray was great at it. He and his family really helped to instill nice memories for a countless number of children over the years. So I've included a link to his obituary on the email that I sent out on this video. I'd like to say our thoughts and prayers go out to his family. Now, I have to report that last night at about 17:15 hours Eastern Standard Time, an unfortunate tragedy unfolded just outside the bunker here as I attempted to test fly one of my recent rebuilds. It was a catastrophic failure of the control system, no pilot error on my part, of course, that caused the aircraft to go into a spiral shortly after takeoff. I'll give you a play-by-play on it after this sometime in the video. Wasn't my fault. Now, Glenn Meyerings went ahead and put together a video on his experience putting together or building a... There's Katie right there. She comes through my videos from time to time. That's my daughter. Anyway, old Glenn there, he's putting together himself a propeller for the Pete and Paul. Evidently, they're going to try to get that table sacky Pete and Paul air camper flying this summer. Todd's building the motor up and Glenn's putting the prop together, and he did a little video on it, so I'll try to put a link in there for that video. A little content for the chapter. Thank you very much, Glenn, during these pandemic times. And I guess that Todd Shaw, vice president, is taking on the task of putting together the 65 Continental that blew up on a dude when he was taking his check ride. We got most of the parts out there. They're short of a we're short of a cam shaft, but I think I can get that off Tom Leahy, at least twice. He told me I could about a year or two ago when I talked to him about it last, but maybe Todd will make a little video on that and post it so we can see how he's progressing with assembling a 65 horsepower Continental motor. That ought to be interesting. Last evening, April 20th, at about 17:15 Eastern Standard Time, tragedy unfolded as a recently restored Carl Goldberg Senior Falcon powered by a .58 Sato 4-stroke engine and piloted by an unnamed individual attempted takeoff and climb out to perform a series of test maneuvers after completing a recent restoration. Weather conditions at the time were light and variable winds, temperature 56, dew point 48, visibility 3 to 5 miles variable in mist, and clouds at 2,500 foot scattered. Weather was not considered to be a causal factor for the accident. Runway conditions were reported to be less than favorable for this type of procedure. Prolonged rain showers had made the ground soggy, and the grass caused a lot of drag because it was very thick due to the recent weather conditions, in spite of the fact that it had been cut just 2 days prior by the pilot's wife. Prior to taking off, the pilot performed a series of pre-flight checks on the engine and flight controls, and no anomalies were detected. The pilot advanced the throttle to 100% or firewall power, and acceleration was slow at first, but continually increasing slightly, except for the occasional water patch. Just prior to reaching the end of the runway, the pilot was able to lift the aircraft off and climb out at a deck angle of approximately 3 to 5 degrees pitch up. The pilot allowed the aircraft to accelerate and initiated a gentle bank to the right to clear the tree line at the end of the runway. During the climb out at approximately 15 to 20 feet AGL, the aircraft entered a series of uncommanded
rolls to the right while pitching down about 10 degrees. There was little time for reaction by the pilot, but he did attempt to counter the rolling tendency with opposite aileron, but to no avail. The aircraft struck the ground, right wing tip first, followed by a cartwheeling impact. The debris field was approximately 15 feet long. The wings separated from the fuselage, and there was extensive damage to the fuselage and light damage to the wing. The spar had not been compromised. All flight controls were over in the corner. This is a common phrase used by test pilots in the industry. All parts of the aircraft were recovered and taken to a temporary assembly area in the basement of the bunker in Webster Township to be examined by the National Transportation Safety Board. Investigation of the 66-year-old pilot indicated that he was well rested and could account for the previous 24 hours being free of drugs or alcohol. He claims to have a substantial amount of experience in the Goldberg Senior Falcon and had built this example 5 years prior to the crash. The pilot, who sustained minor damage to his ego, agreed to submit to a drug and alcohol test involving a urine sample and a blood test. No breathalyzer was available at the time of the incident. Training records indicated that although the pilot had not flown this type of aircraft for several years, he had experience in several aircraft that were considered to be of the same type, and his experience had been within the preceding 90 days. Although he was in contact with air traffic controllers, the pilot did not make a distress call. There was no flight plan on file. Officials expect a complete report to be available in a period of 60 to 90 days from now. There are plans to repair the aircraft and return it to an airworthy condition, although a completion date is not available at this time. The pilot's flying privileges have been temporarily suspended pending the results and review of the investigation and after toxicology reports are complete.
Huh. That's quite a story, wasn't it? I've been there a time or two myself. Situations like that's where you probably should have fallen back and using your superior airman experience and knowledge to avoid situations where you need to use your superior airman skill to keep yourself from busting your dumb aviator's ass from time to time. Anyway, I hope that fella gets over that whole situation. We're on to our next feature, which is one of my favorites, called How Not to Be a Clod at the Airport. I studied on how to do animation, and I think I got a little bit better animation for you this time.
Here's one that a lot of pilots don't get, and that's where to do your run-up. I know it's easy for you to figure out where to do it at your home airport because that's where you learned how to fly probably, or you've been in other people's airplanes, and that's where people do the run-up at your particular airport. But what about when you go to another airport that you're not familiar with and there's nobody there to tell you what to do or where they usually do their run-up? What do you do then? Well, I can tell you what you don't want to do. You don't want to look like a clod at the airport. Basically, there's two criteria that you go by when you figure out where to do a run-up. Number one, it's got to be into the wind. And number two, it's got to be out of the way. Now, which one do you think is more important, into the wind or out of the way? I know you're going to say into the wind because it cools your engine off. Well, I got to tell you, I've flown a lot of different piston engines, radial engines, antique engines, pressure cowlings, no cowling, and of all the airplanes I've flown, I've never had any of them overheat because they're operating on the ground too long. Now that will happen with home builds because they call them up so tight. For the most part, if you have an engine that's overheating on the ground, you really got a problem. That has very little to do with which way you do your run-up, because what about a day where it's very hot and there's no wind? Okay, so being into the wind, I think, is a kick back to the old days when they had Curtis Jennies and things like that. And it also doesn't make any sense in the wintertime. Your engine's freezing cold. What difference does it make? You want it to warm up, so you don't want to be into the wind. So it's, in my point of view, into the wind is just something, a throwback from the old days, but it's a good thing to do. You should probably point your airplane as much into the wind as possible when you do your run-up. The second point is out of the way, and this is where a lot of us, I'm afraid to say, are clueless as to how to go about doing our run-up. And I've got a little illustration here I'll show you for what you typically see at Tango Delta Zulu and other airports. Now in this first animation of mine, we have the airport, typical airport run-up area. You see the tetrahedron there telling us which way the wind's blowing, and we have an area of picnic tables and whatnot. At any rate, our pilot, Clyde Hopper Clyde, taxis out, hogs the taxiway, and parks in a position that will block the rest of the access to the run-up area, because he hasn't had the presence of mind or the situational awareness to realize he's not the only one on the airport, and somebody may come along. They'll have to taxi past him and then get over and get into the area to do the run-up. And of course, Clyde's not cognizant of his prop wash, and he's blowing his prop wash all over the place where people are trying to have a picnic. Now, I show picnic tables, but it could be an open hangar door, a parking area, whatever. You have to be cognizant of where you're blowing your prop wash. Well, there wasn't anybody there when I started my run-up, is something Clyde would say, as the jet sits there patiently waiting for Clyde to finish his run-up while he's dusting off the picnic table, all because Clyde didn't have the presence of mind or the forethought to park his airplane where it wouldn't blow things away or get in the way of other airplanes that need to taxi in and out. The key to success is preparation and knowledge. You know that the most important thing is to be out of the way. Into the wind is secondary. If you're at another little airport, it's pretty simple. You go where everybody else is doing their run-up and you do your run-up there. If you're at a bigger airport, say like Port Columbus, it's controlled. The things still are the same. You have to stay out of people's way, and that's up to you, the pilot, to figure that out. So look at the chart before you go, figure out where you're going to do it, and then hop in the airplane, taxi out there, and do that run-up. Now, at a controlled airport like Columbus, you can ask to go to a run-up block, or tell the controller that you need a place to do a run-up, and you tell him where you're planning on doing it, and he'll probably approve you to do it. But at any rate, you go do your run-up, and then you leave the run-up place and you go get in line to take off. When you pull into the run-up block, move to the end that you would be closest to the runway so that you leave room for other people that are coming in. And above all, make sure that you're clear of the space so airplanes can taxi past you and you're not going to block the area. Here you can see Clyde has finally figured it all out. He's pulled into the block in the proper position. Two other airplanes have joined him. They're doing their run-up, and along comes a big G5 going to taxi right by him. And that guy is going to look out that window. He's going to say, hey, man, these guys at this airport really know what they're doing. The last airport we were at had a bunch of clods blocking our way.
Well, all right then, folks. That's the end of this installment of the 582nd video update. I hope you enjoyed it. Trying to make them videos a little bit better using some fancy effects and whatnot with that animation. It's a struggle for me to figure it out, but I'm getting there. I hope you enjoyed it. In the meantime, we'll see you next time.